Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of ARTFX Tutorial Tuesday. So, last week I showed you how I make my drops, and this week I want to talk about a subject which I think a lot of people have been waiting for. Today I want to talk about adding sub-bass to our current bass line. Let's get started. First of all, let's play this to see what I've got so far. Okay, so the first thing I do is creating a new MIDI track. Then I drag this track up so it sits underneath my bass group track. Then I select the track and group it by pressing Ctrl+G on my keyboard. I now rename this group to #sub and let's give it the same green color as the bass group track. On this sub-bass track I'll load up Operator, but every synth or VST instrument which has a sine waveform available will be able to do this. Now, you always want your sub-bass to follow along the same notes as your mid-range bass. To do this, I need to copy over the notes from the bass tracks to my sub-tracks. As you can see, I have a lot of small clips in my bass tracks, and to make things easier for myself, I'll consolidate these clips to a single clip by selecting all the clips in the bass group and then pressing Ctrl+J on my keyboard. Now I have 4 big clips which I can drag and drop on my sub-tracks. So let's Ctrl click and drag the top clip to the sub-track, and then I solo this track so I can hear what I've got so far. Okay, so as you can hear, the pitch bend automation is also copied along with the track. I now check in my mid-range bass patch for the pitch bend amount. This is set to +12 semitones, so in the sub-bass patch I also need to change the pitch bend amount to +12. And that's basically it. I now have a sub-bass layer following along the same notes as the mid-range bass. But I can improve this. Okay, so as you can hear, there are some popping and clicking noises in the patch. This is caused by the fast notes in the bass line. So what I can do is simply stretch these notes so the sub is only triggered once and plays along the time period of the mid-range sound. By doing this I can get rid of most of the unwanted pops and clicks. So the next thing to do is make sure all the notes are hitting in the right frequency area. For instance, these high A notes play an octave above the main subline. I can select these and press Shift plus the down arrow on my keyboard to transpose them down a full octave, which is equal to 12 semitones. Now these notes hit in the same frequency area as the other subnotes. So now on the envelope settings, I take down the release all the way. And most producers will probably shoot me for this, since this introduces some unwanted clicks at the end of the subnotes. But here's how I control these clicks. I add an instance of EQ8 to the sub-bass track and low pass everything below 100 Hz. Now the clicks should be gone. One cool trick in Ableton's EQ is the following. You can make a steeper EQ curve by placing 2 points on the exact same setting, both in low pass mode. That way the EQ will get a much steeper curve. I found that this works really well on sub-bass and it gives it a more distinct sound. Now, the 4th point, I place it a little bit higher than the other 3. This boosts the area around the cutoff point, which basically makes the bass a bit louder in the upper harmonics. Okay, so now I can duplicate my sub-bass track, and then I control click and drag the second MIDI clip to this track. Now I only need to dive into the MIDI clip to make sure all the notes are in the same octave and that they are fully sustained and not re-triggered. So as you can hear, there's also a heavy pitch bend on this sound, which I don't want. I want the sub to be very clean compared to the mid-range bass. So I can also delete that automation from the MIDI clip. For now, let's duplicate this track again, and then I copy the third bass MIDI clip to this track. I do think that this particular laser bass patch doesn't really need a sub bass, since it's a high frequency sound. But let's try it out and see how it sounds. So after I copied over the clip, I first take out all of the pitch bend automation, since I like my sub to be solid. Then I make sure that all the notes are fully sustained and not re-triggered when they don't need to. After I found the right octave for this sub bass track, it should sound something like this. Okay, so now to make sure the mid-range bass and the sub-bass are not overpowering each other, I drag another instance of EQ8 to the end of my mid-range bass group and high-pass it at 100 Hz. This should make sure that the sub and mid-range bass don't contain overlapping frequencies. Now to be absolutely sure, I also add another instance of EQ8 to my subgroup track and low pass it again at 100 Hz, but this time with a much more gentle curve. And now comes the trick in making this sub more heavy. It's called saturation. I drag an instance of saturated to the group track and I place it before the EQ. Now I can turn up the drive to add some more subtle distortion in the form of saturation. Oops, sorry. I put the saturator on the mid-range bass track. Let's move it to the sub-bass track. So now if I turn up the drive, you can hear that the sub becomes much more powerful. But always use the volume knob at the right to control the output volume. So Now we have a pretty solid sub bass underneath our main bass line. Sweet! I mean, one more thing, I don't like the sub underneath the laser bass, so I am going to delete that. See? Much better. This laser patch can actually be treated as a synth. And that's basically it. Next week we go on with the sub bass area of the track. I'll teach you guys how to make a sweet sub bass drop patch. See you next week.